Good morning, my dear children. How are you all? Hope you all are fine. Today, let's learn about respiration in organisms. What is respiration? Why do we breathe? Why are running makes a person breathe faster? Do you know the answer? Let's learn about this from this lesson. Breathing. It's a part of respiration. It is essential for survival of living organisms. We cannot live without respiration. It is very important for all living organisms. In your previous class, you have learned that organisms are made of small microscopic unit that is called cells. A cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of an organism. Each cell of an organism performs certain functions, for example, nutrition, transport, excretion, and reproduction. To perform these functions, the cell needs energy. Even when we are sleeping, or eating, or reading, we require energy. But where does this energy come from? Your mother or parents insist that you should eat regularly. Am I right? Because the food has stored energy. We have to eat food regularly because that provides us energy. The food has stored energy which is released during respiration. So we all living organism, we all respire to get energy from food. So why do we breathe? We breathe to get energy from the food. During breathing, we breathe in air that is rich in oxygen and we breathe out air which is rich in carbon dioxide. The air we breathe in is transported to all parts of the body and it ultimately reaches to the cell. In the cells, the oxygen in the air helps in the breakdown of food. The process of breakdown of food in the cell with the release of energy is called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration takes place in the cells of all organisms. In the previous lesson, that is in the lesson Nutrition in Animals, you have learned that in the cell, the food or glucose is broken down into carbon dioxide and water using oxygen. During that process, that release energy. So the breakdown of glucose with the use of oxygen is called aerobic respiration. Sometimes food can also broken down without using oxygen. That is called anaerobic respiration. So cellular respiration are of two types, anaerobic and aerobic respiration. When the breakdown of glucose or when the breakdown of food occurs with the use of oxygen, that is called aerobic respiration. If the breakdown of food occurs without using oxygen, that we can term as anaerobic respiration. The breakdown of food releases energy. When glucose reacts with oxygen, in the presence of oxygen, glucose reduces to carbon dioxide, water and energy. There is some other organisms that survive in the absence of air, that is anaerobes. That is, these organisms can survive in the absence of air. They get energy through anaerobic respiration. Just now you have learned that what is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration means the food can be broken down without using oxygen. Breakdown of food without using oxygen is termed as anaerobic respiration. Some organisms can live without oxygen. They get energy through anaerobic respiration. In the absence of oxygen, the glucose breaks down into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The equation may be represented as glucose. In the absence of oxygen, it forms carbon dioxide plus alcohol plus energy. So, yeast is an example for anaerobes. It is a single-celled organism. Yeast is a single-celled organism. It respires anaerobically, that is without using oxygen. And during this process, it yields alcohol. So far we have learned that glucose or food, when break down without using oxygen, it produces alcohol. So yeast is anaerobes that respire anaerobically, and during that process it produces alcohol. Similarly, our muscle cells can also respire anaerobically, but only for a short time or when there is a temporary deficiency of oxygen. If the oxygen is not available, in that cases our muscle cells can also respire anaerobically. Anaerobically means without using oxygen. That is only for a short time. During heavy exercise or fast running, cycling, walking for many hours or heavy weight lifting, the demand for energy is high. In that cases, the supply of oxygen to produce the energy is limited. When you lift a heavy load or when we walking for many hours or in the case of fast running, cycling, etc., our body demand for energy is high. The demand of energy is high. But the supply of oxygen to produce the energy is limited. In that cases, the anaerobic respiration takes place in the muscle cells to fulfill the demand of energy. When there is no sufficient oxygen in our body or in the cell, in that cases our muscle cells respire anaerobically, that is without using oxygen. The breakdown of food without using oxygen is termed as anaerobic respiration. If there is no sufficient oxygen, for example, when we lift a heavy load, that time our body will not get enough oxygen. In that cases, muscle cells respire anaerobically to fulfill the demand of energy. The equation may be represented as glucose in muscles. When glucose react or glucose in the absence of oxygen, it produces lactic acid and energy. In the muscles, glucose or food break down into lactic acid and energy, that is in the absence of oxygen. Have you ever wondered why you get muscle cramps after heavy exercise? The cramps occur when muscle cells respire anaerobically. So far we have learned that our muscle cell respire anaerobically for only a short time to fulfill the demand of energy. In that case, muscle cramps occur. The partial breakdown of glucose produces lactic acid. The accumulation of lactic acid causes muscle cramps. Why our muscle cramps after heavy exercise? Because the partial breakdown of glucose produces lactic acid. This lactic acid accumulation causes muscle cramps. Then how do we get relief from this muscle cramps? We get relief from these cramps after a hot water bath or a massage. Why it is so? Hot water bath or massage improves circulation of blood. As a result, the supply of oxygen to the muscle cells increases. The increase in the supply of oxygen results in the complete breakdown of lactic acid into carbon dioxide and water. After heavy exercise, our muscle cells cramps. Why? Because the partial breakdown of glucose. Our muscle cell respire anaerobically, that is, that time partial breakdown of glucose takes place that produces lactic acid. This lactic acid accumulates in the muscle cramps, that causes muscle cramps. When we use hot water bath or a massage, that improves circulation of blood, that increases the blood circulation. When the blood circulation increases, our muscle cell, especially muscle cell, get enough oxygen. That results in the complete breakdown of this lactic acid into carbon dioxide and water. Next is breathing. You have already learned that breathing means taking in air rich in oxygen and giving out air rich in carbon dioxide with the help of respiratory organs. The taking in of air rich in oxygen into the body is called inhalation, and giving out of air rich in carbon dioxide is termed as exhalation. Inhalation means when we breathe in, we are taking oxygen. The taking in of air rich in oxygen into the body is called inhalation. The giving out of air rich in carbon dioxide is termed as exhalation. It is a continuous process which goes on all the time and throughout the life of an organism. This process, that is inhalation and exhalation, are a continuous process. It occurs throughout our life. The number of times a person breathes in a minute is termed as breathing rate. The number of times a person breathes in a minute, that is in 1 minute, how many times a person breathes, that number is termed as breathing rate. During breathing, inhalation and exhalation takes place alternately. During breathing, inhalation and exhalation takes place alternately. A breath means one inhalation plus one exhalation. So breathing rate is the number of times a person breathes in a minute. Would you like to find out your breathing rate? Do one activity. Find out your breathing rate at different situation. One, before running. Secondly, just after finishing running. In two cases, you have to find out your breathing rate. That is, count how many times you breathe in and breathe out in a minute. In two different situations, how many times you breathe in and breathe out in a minute. You can realize that these values are different. Why do we feel hungry after a physical activity? If you have done a heavy work, you feel hungry. When you feel drowsy, does your breathing rate slows down? Does your body receive sufficient oxygen? Whenever a person needs extra energy, he breathes faster. As a result, more oxygen is supplied to our cells. It speeds up the breakdown of food and more energy is released. That means if we do or if you have done a heavy exercise, that speeds up the breakdown of food and more energy is released. In that cases, our body needs more and more energy. To get more and more energy, we have to eat the food. That means we feel hungry after a physical or heavy exercise or physical activity. Thank you.